Labor promised to help more Australians into more affordable homes. Well, today we're going to take a deep dive. New government, new schemes are available. Let's have a look at it and see what's available. So Jaden, let's start off with the home equity scheme.
Yeah, so this was one of Labor's centerpieces of the election, where the government potentially is going to own 40% of the property with you. So I guess the benefit is you're going to have to borrow a lot less using this scheme. So if it's an established home, they'll potentially offer up 30% of the equity or the ownership of the property, and you'll put in the rest. There's a limit of 10,000 spots, so similar to what we saw with the previous schemes under the previous government. The tricky thing here is the income price cap, so $90,000 for individual, $120,000 for couples, and the price caps will vary by region. Now, it's going to start July 2022, which is awesome. So potentially, if you're looking at buying and you're going to tick a couple of these boxes, you will be able to look at buying as soon as this year.
Now, they haven't actually said how you can apply for this scheme, so whether the banks are going to have it or if it's going to be similar to WA where it's actually looked after primarily by the government. So something to watch out for. I dare say they'll have more information come June once we get closer to the July deadline.
Yeah, I think one of the challenges with the schemes is going to be probably that income cap, so a couple of $120,000, because if you're at like a 6 times debt to income ratio, you potentially might struggle or only just scrape through in some Sydney areas with a 950 property. In the other areas, it probably makes more sense. So that's good. And like I said before, with this scheme, potentially you're borrowing less than you would with some of the other schemes that are out there. Nathan, what's some of the other criteria that are going to work with this?
Now, one thing to keep in mind, as Jaden said, 10,000 spots each year. So it looks like it's something they're going to continue to roll over each year. But the main eligibility here is you do need to be an Australian citizen, at least 18 years of age. Now, this is a big one because we do have a lot of couples that apply together. One's usually a citizen, the other one might be a permanent resident, and that's a huge deterrent. We think that that's not really going to be great for people in those sort of situations. So that's something that to keep in mind. The income caps we talked about before must be your principal place of residence to live in. One thing we saw which was quite cool is that you don't need to be a first homeowner. So as long as you don't own a property either in Australia or overseas, you'd actually qualify for this scheme. And effectively, the other thing to keep in mind is any associated costs, although you might be in an equity arrangement where the government owns 30% of the property, you'd actually be liable for the full amount of stamp duty, legal fees, bank costs, and any ongoing costs like rates, strata, and other bills. So that's a question we do get asked a lot. Does the government kick in for those things? And as we can see here, the answer would be no.
Now, the thing to remember as well is under this scheme, the government takes, I guess, any upside or downside. So if your property value goes up by $100,000 when you go and sell it, the government owns 30% of your property and they keep that. So keep that in mind. It also seems like it could be kind of restrictive. A lot of first home buyers we talk with potentially buy their home as a stepping stone and might want to turn it to an investment property in the future. With this scheme, it looks like that's not going to be possible. Like Nathan said, it has to be a home that you're living in sort of ongoing, and then when that changes, potentially you may have to sell. And I guess when we have more info on that, we'll let you know. But a couple of things looking at. And I guess as we covered in another video as well, under the WA Key Start sort of structure, which is similar to this, some of the rates probably weren't as competitive as the banks, so you're paying a bit of a premium, but potentially, if you don't have the deposit, it gets you in the market. So that's the Help to Buy scheme coming out this year. When we have more info on it, because everything kind of just, we'll just starting to form a government, we'll have more on that. The next scheme is the Regional First Home Buyer Support Scheme. So this is much the same as the First Home Loan Deposit Scheme that we've seen over the last couple of years, where the government acts as a guarantor and lets you borrow up to 95%, so put in a 5% deposit without any lender's mortgage insurance. Obviously saves you a fair chunk. Again, it's limited to 10,000 spots. There's income caps of $125,000 for individuals, $200,000 for couples. There are property price caps like the previous schemes, I guess, as we've covered up here. And interestingly, they said it's going to be reviewed half yearly. So I guess if the market keeps kind of storming up in different areas, there's a chance that they're going to review that and adjust it as necessary. The big thing is it doesn't start until January 2023. So if you're thinking about trying to get into this scheme, well, firstly, you need to live in the region for at least 12 months. So it's not like you can just decide you're going to move to Dubbo and buy a place there. You have to be living there and be, I guess, a local. And you've got to wait 6 months. So, it's not going to be available for next year. So if you are looking at buying the short term, this scheme is not going to really work. and it's not going to be kind of suitable for you. Nathan, I guess it's similar to the next scheme, which is the first home loan deposit scheme. So if you want to talk us through that, how does that work? This is effectively an extension of the existing first home loan deposit scheme that the previous government put in place.
Yeah, effectively the spots are going to be reset. So they're only going to do another 10,000. The coalition said they were going to have a lot more spots. I think they said 30,000. So we've only got 10,000 spots available. Unfortunately, we saw spots come live on February this year, and they were taken up pretty quickly. We probably only saw about 1 to 2 months of availability before the spots were taken up. And each time they release these spots, it feels like they're actually getting taken up quicker and quicker because people are more and more aware of them. So 10,000 spots, income caps, 125,000 for an individual, 200,000 for a couple. Once again, you have to be a citizen. That's one thing that we see as a detriment as well.
The other thing that there was talk of during the election was increasing the property price caps now, and there's been confusion on that because we've been asked about that. Unfortunately, it's just on the coalition's one, so that was only on the coalition's one rather. So like you can see here on my screen, the property price caps that were in existence last year, 600,000 for the suburb in Brisbane, the Brisbane cap is how it's going to stay. So potentially the coalition proposed a bit of an increase in this. So just keep that in mind. But I guess to your point, Nathan, if you're looking at getting the scheme, how can you kind of get a foot in the door earlier?
And the other thing to keep in mind here is they have said that they will review the price caps as well. So maybe next year or in the next 6 months, it might be reviewed, but right now they haven't changed. We are finding a lot of our first homeowners are starting to look and are keen to get in a spot in that scheme. A couple of things you need to be mindful of. One, you need to make sure you have your 2022 tax returns lodged from the 1st of July or as soon as you can. So practically speaking, you want to make sure you have everything ready to rock and roll. So on the 1st of July, you can submit. Secondly, we are getting clients pre-approved with lenders that have spots under the scheme in the understanding that when they buy, as long as spots are available, we can transition the pre-approval straight on the first home loan deposit scheme. That's having huge benefits because people can get themselves in a position that they're ready and then pull the trigger as long as they know from July 1, they'll have a high chance.
Yeah, the third thing to keep in mind with this scheme is I had a client the other day, her taxable income was going to be pretty close to the cap, the 125. So I said, I'll maybe chat to your accountant and see what you can do. The accountant actually suggested in her situation, obviously everyone's situation is different, so you should need to get advice in your personal situation. But in her situation, she was actually able to use the first home super saver scheme to reduce her taxable income to make sure that she's going to be under the cap for the end of this financial year and qualify for a spot, with the added advantage of actually being able to contribute another $5,000 to a savings that she can kind of use down the line. So especially now, given where we are in the year, there's still another sort of month or so to go to the end of the financial year, it could actually be a good time to sort of hit up your accountant, have a look and see, hey, does it make sense for me to do that contribution to my first home super saver? I'm going to get more deposit in my account potentially. Yeah, I'm going to have less take-home pay for the next 4 weeks, but it means that I'm going to be eligible for this scheme potentially. I'm going to jump on there. So I think definitely look at that. Like Nathan said, we're actually getting a lot of people shortlisted and getting them on the waiting list effectively now for when the 1st of July comes along. So if you are thinking about buying in the next realistically 6 months, there's a couple of banks that can do pre-approvals, and we'd love to help you out because we can potentially get you shortlisted. Like you said, you need to get your tax return sorted, but being a bit organised now, it can be the difference between getting the spot, having your lender's mortgage insurance waived, even getting access to better interest rates that the banks otherwise reserve for people with 20% deposit. So it's worth checking out. That's a really huge scheme. The other schemes that the Labor government are providing aren't kind of going to directly help first home buyers in the short term. There's going to be the establishment of a National Housing Supply and Affordability Council. So as we all know, as we've covered kind of in previous videos of property, the more demand there is, but the less kind of supply of properties. There's lots of people wanting to buy, but not lots of places to be bought. Prices go up, but if there's lots of properties being built and less kind of demand, prices soften, it makes it more affordable. So the government's trying to establish a housing supply and affordability council to try and address that and say, like, how can we find, open up more land to be developed, create more property and sort of ease some of those supply issues and sort of temper the demand. So I guess wait and see what happens with that. It's not going to be a short-term fix by any means. And equally, the Housing Australia Future Fund, there's a lot of focus on affordable and social housing to give access to that. Again, this probably isn't going to directly help people, first home buyers, I guess specifically in the short term. It's definitely going to be helpful over the next sort of 5 years, making more affordable and social housing, which is obviously a huge issue across the states. But as to the sort of short-term fix, it's probably not going to help staff in that sort of time horizon. Yeah.
So all interesting things, guys. If you have any questions, hit us up at huntergalloway.com.au. Did you know at Hunter Galloway, we help home buyers right across Australia. We're based in Brisbane, but there's no cost for this service, and we deal with people Australia-wide. So if you're looking to get your loan approved, hit us up at huntergalloway.com.au or call us on 1300 088 065, and we'll see you next time.